Darkside 380 here. Please give me a like, subscribe, and turn those notifications on. If there's any topics you would like to have covered, please email me at thedarkside07584@gmail.com. Darkside 380 here. Give me a like, subscribe, and turn those notifications on. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing one of the most evil, vile human beings to ever walk this planet. The most wickedest man to ever live. Aleister Crowley. Born Edward Alexander Crowley, October 12th, 1875. He was born into a very influential family. The town where he lived was a small resort town. His dad was a retired engineer. They owned stock in the family business called Alton Ales that was founded in 1763. So there was no reason for Aleister ever to work. There was no reason for his dad to ever work. This is generational money, not something that just came overnight. So, that kind of gives you a little bit of this guy's mentality. His dad also was a minister, and young Aleister used to go with him, through Britain while he was ministering to people. His parents' sect of Christianity really, they were extremely strict. They believed in no pleasure, no nothing. So you can already tell this would turn a young man totally against that. When you're told you can't have any pleasures in life, and that's what young Aleister did. He didn't like it when he was a kid. The name of the sect that his parents were a part of was called the Christian Plymouth Brethren sect. And Aleister's dad passed from tongue cancer. And, Aleister always called his dad his hero. Now, when his dad passed, this is when he really started to rebel. This is when he totally went against Christianity and wanted to do nothing but evil and bring evil onto this earth. His goal in life was to commit the ultimate sin. And I'd say he did that. So let's keep going. Aleister eventually went to the University of Cambridge, where he studied mountaineering and poetry. He was always seeking some kind of adventure. And at the same time, this is really weird. It could be true, wouldn't surprise me. But people were saying that he was part of the British intelligence agency. He was really starting to get more and more into the occult at this time. He finally found the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They trained him on spells, rituals, and other occult practices. He liked the practices, but he didn't like the people in there because they weren't as serious about this as he was. This was Aleister's life. This was what he felt like his calling in life was to do nothing but magic and bring evil onto this earth. So he often clashed heads with people in the order. One of the guys that was in this order was Bram Stoker, the guy who wrote Dracula. So that kind of gives you an idea of what type of people that we're dealing with. Not your just average Joe walking down the street. Hey, these are guys that have buku money and, are just evil human beings. Eventually, Aleister went on and left the order because, he just felt like these guys are playing with magic. And, that wasn't what Aleister was about. This guy, he ate, slept, and dreamed about magic. His whole life was revolved around magic. Um, yeah. Also, I said that he went to school for poetry. This man's poetry is just vile garbage. Like, I mean, it's disgusting. Um, I don't even want to read it on here because there's no words for how disgusting this poetry is. I don't even know how you can call it poetry. It's just hot garbage to me. Like, yeah, you can tell he was just a disgusting human being. But after he left the Golden Dawn, he explored some of Mexico, then studied some Hindu and Buddhist practices. In 1904, him and Rose Edith Kelly got married, and they explored the world for their honeymoon. One of the places Aleister and Rose happened to explore on their honeymoon was Egypt. Now in Egypt, he performed a ritual and made contact with a demon or supernatural being named Iwas. That gave him the Book of the Law, or, actually his wife, I believe at this time, was possessed and kept saying to him that this entity wanted him to write this book. And that's when he wrote the Book of the Law. His religion is based on this book. It's like their Bible. His religion is called Thelema. Also at this time, he got introduced to the Lesser Keys of King Solomon. It's a grimoire on spells, rituals, and other occult practices. And he started searching for a house that had these specific qualifications in order for him to have this spell. And that's when he found Boleskine House on Loch Ness. Boleskine House alone could have its own video. I believe it was a church that got burned down with the whole congregation in it. So, yeah, I mean, and it's on Loch Ness, so it's a very secluded area. Actually, after Aleister passed, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin happened to buy the house. So he goes on and purchases Boleskine House, and he starts performing this ritual. And one thing that, like, when you're doing these rituals, spells, or anything like that, like, you have to finish these or close them out. I'm not saying to go on and do these or anything like that. But anyways, he didn't finish this ritual, and I believe this is when he basically got possessed. That this demon just took a hold of him because he didn't properly finish this ritual. So this left him open to possession. And also this is when, like, things, I mean, his life just increasingly got worse and worse and worse. Like, and by worse, I mean just evil. Like, these spells and just everything this man did was just, it was bad. I mean, so he didn't finish this spell because he was called back to Paris by the leader of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. This spell that he was doing, or ritual, whatever you would like to call it, involved him basically enslaving these demons It's a very long ritual. I've looked into it a little bit. Actually, I know a decent amount about it. And, I mean, you conjure up these dukes of hell and all kinds of stuff. This is nothing to be played with. The spiritual world is nothing to be played with, especially if you're messing with evil. I don't suggest doing any of it. Crowley was also bisexual. He liked men and women. So that gives you a little bit more info about him. The Golden Dawn had disbanded, so at this time, like, basically Crowley was going crazy, just, doing all kinds of evil stuff. And started getting more and more into practicing black magic. He performed a ritual in Africa, and this is when he really started getting into sex magic. Sex magic became like the centerpiece of his religion, his practices, rituals, whatever you would call it. Like, basically at this time, this is when, if he was doing a ritual, you better believe it had sex involved. And I'm not talking about, normal sex. I'm not even going to talk about it because of how vile it is. But, urinating on each other and just, disgusting stuff. July 1905, Rose and Aleister had a daughter named Newt that passed away shortly after she turned 2 years old. But shortly thereafter, they had another daughter, on December 6, 1907. In 1909, Crowley filed for divorce, and around the same time, Rose was committed to an asylum because of the abuse that she received from Aleister. And also, she was an alcoholic. So, I mean, really, I feel for Rose because you shouldn't be messing with that stuff. But, you're going all around the world practicing these rituals and stuff, opening yourself up to evil stuff. What do you think's going to happen? And yeah, I'd end up in a nut cell too. In 1911, Aleister came out with a book of ceremonial poetry called The Book of Lies. He also had gained a pretty big following because of his law of thelema and practicing sex magic. Human beings love sex, so of course he gained a huge following. Because of his knowledge of sex magic, he caught the attention of a master Freemason and founder of the Ordo Templi Orientis, Theodore Roos. And he told him that basically, as I'm not talking a lower degree Mason, I'm talking 33rd degree and up, these guys are promised immortality. Yeah. Shortly thereafter, he met Leah Herzig in the United States. The two had a grand idea of buying this place in Sicily. They called it the Abbey of Thelema. There was they were performing one of these rituals one day or one night, and a member of the congregation, or whatever you would like to call it, a member of this congregation passed away from dysentery. Now, you get that from eating like fecal matter and stuff like that. So that tells you about what kind of practices and rituals these people were doing. Just disgusting. This man named Raoul Loveday, his wife fled the church, and you'll hear more about her later. The people of Sicily at this time, after this guy passed away, were like just get him out of here, get Crowley out of here. We're not wanting any of his nonsense and just evilness around. So, the Prime Minister, Mussolini, kicked them out of the Abbey and kicked Crowley out of Italy, which, who could blame him? So, Leah and Crowley had a daughter also. Her name was Poopy. Yeah, the girl's name was Poopy, and she passed away right around Crowley's 45th birthday. The leader of the OTO passed, so they were in need of a leader. Crowley's second in charge, so hey, who do you think's going to be in charge? Crowley is. Crowley then came to America and started going to all these different Masonic temples, spreading his message of filth. And finally, he settled down at the Agape Lodge in Pasadena, California. This was one of the very few lodges that, Crowley's type of lodges. There's lodges still all over the place. But this is one of the very few that lasted until after World War II. This lodge hosted people like L. Ron Hubbard, the guy who started Scientology, and Jack Parsons, the founder of NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. Both of these guys did rituals together, based on, of course, Crowley's work. And 1946, Jack Parsons and his wife and Hubbard performed a sex magic ritual called Babylon Working, while Crowley oversaw the ritual. Nobody really knows if this ritual worked or not, but I would say that they invoked something evil. Some of Parsons' work is still, it's still in use by NASA and the military. And of course, L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, Scientology is still up and booming. Parsons left the government, but he still continued to do scientific and magic experiments. But then eventually he went and started working with the Israeli military. Parsons, he devoted his life to this Babylon ritual and wrote the book called The Book of the Antichrist and the Book of Babylon. And he would say he was like, some kind of Antichrist himself. Parsons blew himself up while doing an experiment with missile equipment in 1952. He was only 37. Hubbard, of course, used the teachings of Thelema to create basically Scientology's Bible called Dianetics. So that tells you a little bit about Scientology right there. In 1924, Crowley goes back to Paris and Leah went back to America. He once again meets a new woman that tags along with him named Pauline Pierce. Crowley, at this point, he was broke. He was living with a friend named Frank Harris. But this is the crazy part. So Pauline goes back to her husband named Marvin Pierce in October 1924. June 8th, 1925, she has her daughter, Barbara Pierce. also known as Barbara Bush, who went on to marry a member of Skull and Bones, one of our presidents, George Bush. And it's kind of funny, Barbara Bush looks a lot like Crowley, or did look a lot like Crowley. You know, the way that she composed herself, like her mannerisms were a lot like Crowley. So I would say she was probably Crowley's kid. If she wasn't his kid, she was influenced a ton by him, you know, seeing that her mother basically, you know, was his side chick, or whatever you want to call her. In 1932, he goes back to England. He's broke, alone, and he's hooked on heroin because he had asthma his whole life, you know, and back then they would just, here's some opium, here's some heroin, you know. So he was hooked on heroin, broke and alone, as he should be. You know, after a life of practicing filth and spreading your message of dirt and disgustingness, you should be broken alone. You know, I think things turned out exactly the way they should for him. You know, he tried to sue an author because she, you know, said he practiced black magic. Well, yeah, he was practicing black magic. I mean, they named him the most wickedest man. And if you remember me talking about the man that passed away during one of these rituals, well, his wife came and testified for this author about how disgusting Aleister was. So, karma paid him back in full. The judge in this hearing said that he had never, ever heard of such wickedness in his life. And, you know, I don't think anybody has. So, in 1947, Crowley passed in Hastings. And, you know what, I don't like to see anybody be alone or broke or any of that kind of stuff. But this man deserved it, you know. Still to this day, he is influential, you know, in our I'm sure high-ranking members of our government practice his teachings. I'm sure a lot of people practice his teachings. You know, like I said, Jimmy Page bought his house. There's rappers that, you know, wear his sayings like "Do as thou wilt." Jay-Z, I'm pretty sure, was wearing a shirt that said "Do as thou wilt." He also was on the cover of one of the Beatles albums, you know. So, yeah. It's kind of funny, Jimmy Page bought his house, but never even really stayed there. He had a friend stay there, and yeah. Also, Boleskine House had been, I believe, it caught fire 2 times in a row. And this is while no one was there. You know, I'm sure, you know, anything could have happened. Spirits could have caught the house on fire. One of the village people could have caught the house on fire, because who wants that evil around them? You know. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys like this story. I'll be trying to drop you guys some new videos here shortly. Thank you guys. Peace.